Hello friends, I'm going to read you, or at least what I'm going to do this time is tell you a story with just an outline, like I would if I was doing something as a talk rather than as reading it. This one's called Echoes. It was a late April afternoon, and a blind man called Jimmy Marston was walking in a country park, the Roll Valley Country Park, just down the road from where I live. He had his guide dog, his trusty friend, seeing-eye dogs, I think Americans call them. His name was Flynn. He was a beautiful light brown Labrador, intelligent and the best friend that Jimmy had. As they walked into the beginning of the country park footway, near the visitor centre, they walked towards some boys. The dog stopped because it was more sensible to let the boys walk past, and one of the boys, about 11 years old, said, "Are you blind, mister?" "Yes," said Jimmy. "And Flynn, he's my eyes. The only thing is, Flynn can't tell Jimmy what he's seeing. And I've heard there's a new statue down here in the country park." "Aye," said one of the boys, "you're right near it. It's just here." "What's it of?" said Jimmy. "It's a dog." "Can you describe it for me?" "Well, the dog seems to be jumping. It's stretched right out." "What kind of a dog is it?" "Oh, I'm not sure. It's a woolly looking thing." One of the boys said, "I know what it is because my neighbour's got one on the farm. It's an Irish wolfhound." "Ah," said Jimmy. "Do you know where that statue is here? Do you know the legend, the story, boys?" "No, Jimmy. Come on, tell us then. Tell us about this story." "Well, the legend has it that a chief, the O'Cahans ruled in this area back then. Do you know any O'Kanes? Because the O'Kane is the modern O'Kane is the modern way of saying O'Cahan. Aye, my mummy was is an O'Kane, but she married my daddy and the name changed. But her mummy and daddy, my grandparents, they're still O'Kanes," said the 11-year-old boy. "Well, you're probably descended from this ancient chieftain then. They ruled here in days gone by, but they had enemies, and the enemies attacked, and Chief O'Kane was under pressure. He didn't have enough men, and they thought they were going to lose their authority and be chased off the land. But he called his very faithful Irish wolfhound, and it leapt right across the river, is how the legend tells it, and then ran to get reinforcements, who came quickly and saved the day. And the O'Cahans ruled here right into the 1600s. So it just goes to show that a dog," Jimmy patted his Labrador, "can be a man's best friend." The boys stood and they stroked the Labrador and talked to it. It's not really what you're supposed to do with guide dogs, but Jimmy didn't care because he loved children. Soon Jimmy and Flynn walked on down the path, and they were enjoying the spring day. Jimmy couldn't see, but he could hear, and he learned all the bird songs long ago, so he bird listened. Also, when they came to the watchtower, the dog stopped because Jimmy's practice was to touch the watchtower that went back to the days when linen was produced in this area, and he liked to feel the rough stonework and get the shape of the stones on the watchtower. They walked on a little further and came to the weir, and at the weir the sound of water was strong. This was a fast-flowing river coming down from the Sperrin Mountains into the Roll Valley and into Loch Foyle. The smell of spring was everywhere. They met people and everybody talked, even if it was only in passing. Jimmy could smell the wild garlic. He couldn't see the bluebells, but he had an idea of how beautiful it was all around him. When they walked on a little further along the river, they came to a bend where it was deeper and slower moving, and the dog stopped because Jimmy did. And he listened for a few minutes, and twice he heard a jumping fish. And also he heard the call of a heron a bit further up the river, a common bird in this area. He could hear blue tits and great tits and a robin and a blackbird and a song thrush. Quite a list he could hear. They followed the path on further, listening now to the buzz of insects among the branches of the bushes around them, and they went over the bridge. And it really was an idyllic morning to be out. Until that was, Jimmy took a pain in the chest, and it became so intense, and he went down. Here he was, on the other side of the river, near Carrick, and in a bad way. He just managed to feel for the dog, who was obviously alarmed, and release the harness. And the last thing he remembered was this dear dog, Flynn, diving into the water. He heard the splash. And then, that was all Jimmy actually heard at that point. The dog crossed the river, mounted the far bank, shook itself and ran like mad down the path, all the way back to the visitor centre, quite a distance. People were looking at this dog and wondering what the dog was, who the dog belonged to, why was it running wild on its own. And it went right round by the visitor centre, sat outside the tea room, and then it went whom, whum, 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 until such time as the boys came running out of the tea room. Just as the boys came out of the tea room, one of the wardens was walking down the path, and the boys stopped him and explained, this dog, it belongs to Jimmy Marston. He's blind, he's somewhere up the river. There's a problem because the dog wouldn't be on its own. So the warden went into the visitor centre, got them to phone the emergency services, got his quad bike and followed the dog back down the river path, all the way back to the bridge at Carrick. You could see over the bridge Jimmy lying. This wasn't an area where there were so many people walking. Most of the people only walked near the visitor centre. The warden found Jimmy Marston lying there unconscious. He rang on his mobile phone and he told the emergency services the location, and very quickly the ambulance that was already on its way came down the little road that ran down into Carrick and found Jimmy. And they quickly detected that it was a heart problem. They restarted his heart, they got him into the ambulance, and soon he was in hospital. He woke up some hours later in hospital. The doctors and the nurses explained that he'd got a heart problem, but they knew what it was, they could deal with it, it wasn't going to be a problem. The paramedics had got his heart going again, and Jimmy said, I owe my life to them. The doctor smiled, and she said, Jimmy, you owe your life to your dog. Now rest. 2 days later, the boys arrive in to visit Jimmy. They arrive with a newspaper in their hand, and they tell Jimmy about the story, Echo of an Ancient Legend. And they show Jimmy, by reading to him, they explain to him how this story ties in the O'Can legend that he told them about with Flynn's rush across the river and down the river bank in order to get help. Jimmy Marston grinned from ear to ear. There was a photo of Flynn. How did they spell the name, boys? They've spelled it F-L-Y-N. No, said Jimmy, the newspapers can never get anything right. It's F-L-Y-N-N-E. I'll have to tell them. And he started to laugh. A few days later, Jimmy was allowed home. TV crew arrived and got the full story. And Flynn and Jimmy were locally famous. They were even asked to open the agricultural show that year in Limavady, which means Leap of the Dog, incidentally, in Irish. History is often shrouded in myth, perhaps where you come from, these legends, old stories that have been told and retold, and they're unrecognisable. What's truth and what's legend? What's myth and what's fact? Many of these stories seem unlikely, unreal, but then maybe something happens in modern times that makes them seem a little bit more plausible. So Jimmy and Flynn went on to live a long and happy life. But this echo of an earlier story, what does it make you think? Do you think the story about the O'Cans and the dog leaping across the river, wide river, well, that seems impossible, but maybe he leapt in the river and swam. Do you think that story's true? You have to decide. Hope you're all well, my friends. Nice to just share that with you. Bye for now. Bye.